My name is Natalia and I'm 50 years old. All my life, I have lived under one roof. A roof that once echoed with laughter, cries and dreams, and later with silence, disappointment and regret. Sometimes I look at my wrinkled hands and wonder, was it worth it? All those years of working, caring, sacrificing, all those nights of sleepless prayers and endless struggles. If love could build a home, then I had built a castle. But if destiny decides differently, that castle can crumble overnight. When I was 20, my life changed forever. It was a winter evening, cold, foggy and quiet. My parents had gone out for a family dinner. I stayed home because my college exams were close. My brothers, Jacob, who was 19, and Anthony, just 7, went with them. I remember pacing near the window, watching the fog thicken. The city lights looked like fading stars. Then the phone rang. That one call shattered everything. There had been an accident. A truck driver lost control and my parents' car was crushed beyond recognition. By the time I reached the hospital, it was too late. They were gone. Just like that, gone. Only Jacob and Anthony survived. Jacob had a broken arm. Anthony was unconscious but alive. I still remember holding their hands that night in the hospital, promising myself that I would take care of them, no matter what. It wasn't a choice. It was an instinct. From that moment, I stopped being a sister. I became their mother. Days turned into months. I dropped out of college, took a small job in a textile factory during the day, and worked in a bakery at night. Bills, rent, school fees, all depended on me. I learned to survive on tea and leftovers. But when I saw Anthony smiling, holding his school trophy, or Jacob helping me fix the leaking roof, it felt worth it. Jacob grew up fast. He was bright, ambitious, and determined to make something of himself. Anthony, the younger one, was innocent and cheerful, always calling me Mama Nat. That word melted my heart every time. Years passed. I aged before my time. While other girls my age were falling in love, buying dresses, and dreaming of weddings, I was washing uniforms, paying bills, and visiting school parent meetings. I rejected many proposals. People said, "Natalia, you're still young. You deserve a husband, a family." But who would raise my brothers then? Who would keep the promise I made that night at the hospital? When Jacob turned 27, he got married to a sweet girl named Lara. She was polite, kind, and grateful at first. I helped her settle in, cooked for them, took care of the home while Jacob worked. Soon after, Anthony finished college and also found a good job. I felt proud, like a mother watching her sons grow wings. A few years later, Anthony too got married to Maya, a lively modern girl who often called me Auntie Nat. Our house was full again, laughter, food, the sound of children running around. Jacob had 2 kids, Anthony had 1. I used to tell everyone, "These are my children too." I babysat them, sang them lullabies, stayed awake when they were sick. I didn't mind not having my own family, because in them I saw everything I'd ever wanted. But slowly, things began to change. The warm smiles of my sisters-in-law started turning into forced politeness. My brothers, once always around me, now became distant, caught up in their own world, their own families. Sometimes I overheard whispers in the kitchen. Open quote. "She's getting old, Maya." "Yes, Lara, and she keeps using the same room. We could use that space for the kids." "She's done enough. It's time she rests, maybe in some home for old people." Close quote. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but soon the truth became clear. They didn't want me there anymore. I remember the evening when Jacob came to my room. He stood there, his eyes down, his voice soft but trembling. Open quote. "Natalia, maybe it's time you moved somewhere you can rest. You've worked all your life. You deserve peace." Close quote. Peace? Or exile? Anthony couldn't look at me. They had already decided to sell the house, my parents' house, our childhood home, and buy 2 smaller ones for their families. And for me, an old age home. I didn't fight, I didn't scream or curse them, I just smiled weakly and nodded. Open quote, "If that's what makes you happy, then do it." Close quote. Inside, my heart broke into pieces. The next week, they drove me to a home for senior women. It was clean, quiet, and cold. Like a hospital that never healed you. They hugged me goodbye, promised to visit often, but promises fade faster than memories. Every night, I stared at the ceiling, remembering the faces of my parents, wondering what they would say if they saw this. The woman who gave up everything, now sitting alone among strangers, waiting for visitors who never come. But I never hated them. I couldn't. I had raised them. I had seen them cry, laugh, and grow. I still prayed for their happiness because even when your heart is broken, a mother's love never truly dies. Time moved differently inside the old age home. Days blended into nights and nights into endless silence. The laughter of other residents faded by evening, leaving only the ticking of the wall clock slow and merciless. It had been 3 months since my brothers left me there. No calls, no visits. Only one monthly envelope arrived with some money, maybe out of guilt, not love. I used that money to buy yarn and knit sweaters for other old women who had no families either. They often asked me why I was there, and I simply smiled and said that I had taught my brothers everything except gratitude. The caretaker, Mrs. Harris, was kind. She brought me tea in the mornings and talked about her grandchildren. But every night when the lights went out, I cried quietly under my blanket, whispering my parents' names. One day, while cleaning my purse, I found an old photo of me, Jacob, and Anthony as children. We were standing in front of our old house, smiling as if the world belonged to us. That picture felt like a ghost from my past, a reminder of everything that once was. Then one morning, while I sat in the garden knitting, Mrs. Harris handed me the local newspaper. On the front page was a headline that made my heart stop. It was about a man who had been scammed in a property fraud and lost his newly purchased home. Beneath the headline was a picture of Jacob. The article said he had been cheated by a real estate agent who took all his savings. The dream house he bought after selling ours was gone. His wife and children were staying temporarily with her parents. I put the paper down and whispered to myself that karma never loses its way. But I did not feel revenge or anger, only sorrow. Jacob did not deserve to be deceived, even if he had forgotten me. He had worked hard all his life, and now he was broken. 2 weeks later, more bad news came. Mrs. Harris came running to my room holding her phone. A news video was playing about a fire that destroyed a family home due to an electrical short circuit. I saw Anthony's house burning to ashes. He and his family were safe because they were away when it happened, but everything they owned was lost. I sat on my bed for hours, staring at the wall. All the things they had built, all the comfort they had chosen over me, had turned to smoke. I did not smile, and I did not feel victorious. I only thought that maybe now they would understand what it felt like to lose a home. Weeks passed in silence again. I expected nothing. But one afternoon, as I folded laundry, Mrs. Harris called my name. She said I had visitors. My hands froze. No one ever came for me. When I turned, I saw Jacob and Anthony standing in the doorway. Their faces were pale, their eyes sunken, and their shoulders heavy with shame. Jacob carried a bouquet of wilted flowers, and Anthony held a box of sweets. They looked like two boys who had lost their way and finally come home. For a long moment, we said nothing. I just looked at them, the men I had raised, the ones who had left me behind. Jacob knelt beside my chair, tears running down his face. Anthony stood behind him, trembling. They told me they had lost everything, that they were sorry, that they had come to take me home if I would still call them my brothers. I looked at them and saw not the men who had betrayed me, but the children who once held my hands and cried when they were afraid. My heart softened. I told them that they had not lost their home, only their way. And if they had found their hearts again, that was enough for me. They both broke down in tears, and so did I. That evening, I packed my few belongings, my knitting bag, and the old photograph of us. As I left the old age home, the other women waved goodbye. Some smiled, others cried. Mrs. Harris hugged me tightly and whispered that not everyone gets a second chance. I was lucky, and so were they. Outside, Jacob's car was waiting. I sat in the back seat between them, just like old times. None of us spoke much. The silence was full of something new. Healing. We had no home to return to. Everything was gone. So we rented a small 2-bedroom apartment at the edge of the city. The paint was peeling, the furniture was second-hand, but when I stepped inside, I felt something I had not felt in years. Belonging. That night, we cooked together. Lara and Maya joined us too. They were humble, regretful, and apologetic. They said they were wrong to talk about sending me away. Even the children came running to me, calling me Grandma Nat, saying they missed me. I did not correct them. Maybe I had finally become what I was always meant to be. We ate, laughed, and talked late into the night. Jacob promised to find a new job. Anthony said he would help rebuild their lives slowly but together. I told them that houses can be built again, but love, once broken, takes longer to rebuild. They listened quietly. That night, before sleeping, I looked out the small window at the stars. I whispered to my parents that their children were finally together again. It might not be the same home we once had, but it was one built on forgiveness, not walls. And this time we lived happily, not perfectly, but together. The days that followed were slow but peaceful. For the first time in years, I woke up to the sound of family again. It wasn't a grand house or a perfect life, but it was filled with the warmth that I had longed for. The small apartment smelled of coffee in the mornings and laughter in the evenings. Jacob found a part-time job as an assistant at a hardware store. He had lost most of his savings, but he worked with quiet determination. Anthony began repairing electronics for neighbours. Every night they came home tired but grateful. Their wives, Lara and Maya, started cooking together, sharing recipes and sometimes arguing over small things, but it was no longer with bitterness. I helped around the house. I cleaned, cooked, and took care of the children while their parents worked. The children loved listening to my stories, especially about the days when their fathers were little boys. Sometimes they laughed and asked if I had ever been young myself, and I would smile and tell them that every wrinkle on my face carried a story of love and struggle. We lived simply. The walls were bare, but our hearts were full. Each day brought back a piece of what had once been lost. We celebrated birthdays together again. We shared dinners, repaired furniture, and made plans for a better tomorrow. Slowly, I began to feel like I belonged, not as a burden, but as the root of the family tree that still stood after every storm. At night, I often sat by the window, knitting sweaters for the children or blankets for the cold. Sometimes I would catch Jacob watching me quietly, as if he was remembering all the years I had done the same for him and Anthony. The guilt in his eyes was still there, but now it was mixed with love and respect. Months turned into a year. We managed to save a little money. Anthony talked about buying a small plot of land to rebuild a house, not grand but permanent. He said he wanted a home that would never again be taken or destroyed. I listened silently, my heart swelling with quiet pride. I had thought that forgiveness would be impossible, but as time passed, it came naturally. My anger faded like dust washed away by rain. When I saw how hard my brothers worked, how much they regretted what they had done, I realized that love is heavier than resentment. It may bend, but it does not break. One afternoon, I went with Lara and Maya to the market. We bought groceries, fabric, and some small plants for the balcony. On the way back, Maya suddenly slipped on the wet pavement, and I caught her hand before she fell. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said softly that she did not deserve my kindness. I smiled and told her that no one truly deserves love, yet it is the only thing worth giving freely. Back home, the children helped me plant flowers in small pots. They said each plant would carry a wish. One wished for a big home, one for a new toy, and the smallest one wished for Grandma Nat to live forever. I laughed, but inside I prayed that even after I was gone, they would remember the lessons my life had given them. As the seasons changed, our family grew stronger. The wounds that once divided us became reminders of what we had survived together. There were still struggles, money was tight, and sometimes arguments flared. But unlike before, there was no coldness afterward. There were apologies, embraces, and renewed efforts to make things right. One evening while cooking dinner, I realized how peaceful my heart had become. The pain of being abandoned, the loneliness of the old age home, and the sorrow of betrayal had faded into distant echoes. What remained was gratitude. I had been given a second chance to live among the people I loved most. Jacob's children started school again, and Anthony's little boy began learning music. I watched them with pride, feeling as though the years I had lost were finally being returned in the form of laughter and small moments of joy. Every morning, I made it a habit to step onto the balcony with my cup of tea and watch the sunrise. It reminded me that even the darkest nights give way to light. I began keeping a small journal, writing about my days, my thoughts, and my memories. I wrote not to complain, but to leave behind a record for the children, a story of how love and forgiveness could heal what life had broken. Sometimes Lara or Maya would come sit beside me and talk. We spoke of the future, of saving enough to build a bigger house where all of us could live together. They asked me what kind of room I would want. I said I wanted only one thing: a window facing the sunrise. There were moments when sadness still crept in. Sometimes I missed my parents deeply and wished they could see what their children had become. But I also knew they would be proud. I had kept my promise, I had raised my brothers, and even when the world took everything from me, I had not lost my compassion. By the end of the second year, our rented home was filled with life. The sound of children's laughter, the smell of fresh bread, the noise of Jacob fixing a chair and Anthony tuning a broken radio, all of it was music to my heart. I was no longer just their sister. I was their reminder of where they came from, of what love looked like when it refused to give up. And as I sat one evening, surrounded by the family I had fought so hard to keep together, I realized something. True happiness is not found in wealth, in houses, or in comfort. It lives in moments of togetherness, in forgiveness, and in the courage to start again. Time has a quiet way of reminding us that nothing lasts forever. The laughter of children, the sound of busy mornings, even the warmth of shared meals all begin to slow down as the years pass. For me, those peaceful years in our small rented home became the gentlest chapter of my life. I had turned 50. My hair had turned silver, and my hands, once strong and tireless, had begun to tremble slightly. Yet I felt lighter than ever before. There was no anger left, no bitterness, only peace. My heart, once burdened by loss and loneliness, was now filled with calm acceptance. Every morning I still woke up early, long before the others. I liked to sit quietly by the window, wrapped in a shawl, holding a cup of warm tea. I would watch the sun rise above the city buildings and whisper a silent prayer of gratitude for one more day. Life had taken so much from me, but it had also given me moments like these, simple, pure, and real. Jacob's job was going well. He had been promoted to a supervisor at the hardware store, and his confidence had slowly returned. Anthony's small repair business had grown too. He had saved enough to start his own workshop nearby. The pride in their voices whenever they spoke about their work made my heart swell. I had watched them fall and then rise again, not with arrogance, but with humility. The children were growing fast. Their laughter filled the rooms and their footsteps echoed through the narrow hallway. They often sat by me in the evenings, asking for stories from the past. I told them about our parents, about my childhood, about the time when love meant struggle but never surrender. They listened wide-eyed, as if each word was a treasure. As the years passed, my health began to weaken. The long years of hard work and sacrifice had left their marks. My back ached constantly, and I grew tired easily. Jacob and Anthony noticed. They insisted I stop doing household chores. At first, I resisted. I had spent my life taking care of them. It felt strange to be cared for. But they were firm, and for once I let them. They made sure I had everything I needed. They took me for medical checkups, cooked for me, and made my favourite soups. Lara and Maya treated me like their own mother. The children would bring me flowers and little drawings. I kept all of them in a wooden box by my bed. Sometimes, late at night, I would lie awake and think about everything that had happened. The accident, the years of struggle, the betrayal, and finally, the forgiveness. I realized that pain had not destroyed me. It had shaped me. It had made me strong enough to carry others and gentle enough to forgive them. There were days when I would sit quietly in the small garden behind our building where we had planted flowers years ago. The roses had grown tall and their fragrance filled the air. I often spoke to them softly, as if they were old friends. They reminded me of how beautiful life could be, even after enduring storms. One afternoon, Jacob came home with exciting news. He and Anthony had found a small plot of land on the outskirts of the city. They wanted to build a permanent house for the whole family, one that would belong to everyone. They said they wanted to name it after me, House of Natalia. I smiled and told them that names didn't matter, but deep inside, my heart glowed with pride. Construction began soon after. Every weekend we visited the site. The children played in the open field while we watched the walls slowly rise. The day the foundation was laid, I sat down on the ground, touched the soil and felt tears welling up. I whispered to myself that this soil carried not just bricks, but forgiveness, memories, and love. By the time the house was complete, I had grown weaker. I could not walk much without help, and my breath came slower. But the joy of seeing my family together gave me strength. They moved me into my new room, a simple space with a big window facing the sunrise, just as I had wished. The day we all moved in felt like a new beginning. The rooms echoed with laughter, the smell of food filled the air, and the children ran from one end to the other. I sat in my chair, watching everyone move around, feeling as if I was watching a dream I had waited my whole life to see come true. In the evenings, I often sat on the porch, watching the sunset while the children played nearby. Sometimes Jacob or Anthony would sit beside me quietly, their faces soft with reflection. We didn't need words anymore. The silence between us was full of understanding and gratitude. As the months went by, my health continued to fade, but my heart was full. I no longer feared the end of life. I had seen enough to know that love was stronger than loss, and forgiveness was the only thing that made peace possible. On one particularly calm evening, I sat by my window watching the orange sky melt into twilight. The children were laughing in the distance, the smell of dinner filled the house, and the gentle hum of family life surrounded me. I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I realized that my life had come full circle. I had lost everything once, but I had been given it all back. Not in the same form, but in something far deeper. I had raised my brothers, seen them fall, seen them rise again, and now they had given me back the home I had always dreamed of. That night, I wrote my final words in my journal. I wrote that love is not about keeping, it is about giving. That family may break apart, but if love remains, it will always find its way back. I wrote that forgiveness is not weakness, but strength in its purest form. Then I closed my eyes, listening to the laughter from the other room, and whispered a silent thank you to my parents, to my brothers, and to life itself. The next morning, the sun rose through my window, bright and soft, filling the room with golden light. And in that light, everything felt complete. The morning Natalia left this world was calm and bright. The sun had risen early, casting a golden glow over the new house that carried her name. Birds sang outside the window, and the scent of blooming roses drifted through the open curtains. Everything was quiet, gentle, and peaceful, just the way she had lived her life. Jacob was the first to notice that she had not come out for her morning tea. He went to her room, softly calling her name, but there was no response. Natalia lay in her bed, her face calm, a faint smile resting on her lips, as if she was still listening to the sounds of her family in the next room. She was gone. For a long moment, the world seemed to stop. Jacob stood frozen by the door, unable to move, unable to speak. Anthony rushed in behind him, and when he saw her, his knees gave way. Lara and Maya cried quietly, holding each other as the children clung to their parents, confused and frightened. The silence that followed was heavy but not empty. It was filled with the weight of a life that had given everything and asked for nothing. They buried her near the edge of the garden she had loved so much, under the rose bushes she once planted. The family placed her wooden box beside her, filled with the drawings from her grandchildren, her knitting needles, and the old photograph of her with her two brothers as children. The day of her burial, the sky was clear. Even the wind was still, as if nature itself bowed in respect to the woman who had carried so much love in her heart. Afterward, the house felt different. Her absence was everywhere, in the quiet mornings, in the sound of the rocking chair that no longer moved, in the window where she used to sit and watch the sun rise. But at the same time, her presence remained. It was in the warmth that filled the rooms, in the laughter of the children, in the peace that seemed to linger in every corner. Jacob and Anthony often sat together on the porch in the evenings talking about her. They remembered the times she had sacrificed everything for them, the years she had struggled alone, and the forgiveness she had given when they least deserved it. They realized that she had never stopped teaching them, not with words, but with the way she lived. As time passed, they both made it their purpose to live as she had taught them, with kindness, patience, and faith. They treated everyone who crossed their path with respect, helped those in need, and reminded their children of the woman who had made them who they were. The children grew up hearing her stories. They learned that love was not about taking, but about giving, that forgiveness was not weakness, but strength. They often visited her grave, placing fresh flowers and whispering their dreams to her, believing she was still listening. Years went by, but the memory of Natalia never faded. On quiet mornings, when sunlight touched the window where she once sat, Jacob would close his eyes and imagine her there again, her gentle smile, her calm eyes, her voice telling him that everything would be all right. Anthony often said that even though their sister was gone, her lessons were alive in every choice they made. The house she had inspired them to build became more than just a place to live. It became a home of peace, a space of unity where no one was ever left behind again. Lara and Maya carried forward her compassion. They opened a small shelter nearby for elderly women who had no families. They named it Natalia's Haven. They said it was a tribute to the woman who had once been sent to an old age home, but who turned her pain into forgiveness instead of resentment. Many women found comfort there, and the story of Natalia spread quietly among them, a story of selfless love, quiet strength, and unbroken faith. On the anniversary of her passing, the family gathered under the rose bushes in the garden. The flowers were in full bloom, glowing with soft colours in the evening sun. Jacob placed his hand on the soil and whispered that he finally understood what she meant when she said that houses could be built again, but love takes longer to rebuild. He said that her love had rebuilt all of them. That night, as the stars appeared one by one in the sky, the children stood at the window and looked up. They said that Grandma Nat had become one of those stars, the brightest one, the one that never faded. And in that house, where laughter once turned into silence and then into forgiveness, life continued. The sound of children's voices filled the air again. The smell of bread came from the kitchen, and the roses in the garden swayed gently with the wind. Natalia was no longer there in body, but she was everywhere in spirit. In the sunrise, in the warmth of the home, in every act of kindness that her family gave to the world. Her life had been a circle, beginning with love, filled with loss, and ending with love again. She had given everything she had, and in return she had given her family the most precious gift, a heart that never gave up on them, even when they gave up on her. And though the world kept turning, her light remained, steady and eternal, shining quietly from the hearts she had healed. The end.